Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe to the channel for regular content on ancient architecture, as well as all of the latest news from the world of archaeology. If you've followed the Ancient Architects channel over the years, you'll have seen that I've produced a number of videos regarding a lost chapter in the history of the Giza Plateau, the time before the pyramids. It's a history that often goes unmentioned, and the artefacts and discoveries that show there was life at Giza before the pyramids often go unseen. It's a chapter of history that almost feels like it's been purposefully forgotten. It's like a forbidden history. It seems as though some people want to firmly anchor the origins of Giza in the 4th dynasty, and there really does look to be an aversion to anything not aligned with that opinion. And I have to say it is really starting to grate on me. I've emailed a number of experts over the years, and they've always replied and answered my polite questions. But when I've asked about pre-4th dynasty finds at Giza, there's always been radio silence. But why? If the evidence is there, why don't people want Giza to have a longer, more interesting and more diverse history, if there is good evidence to back it all up? Surely it just paints a more colourful picture of the past, adding new levels to an already iconic ancient site on Earth. Giza is a prime location. It's at the beginning of the Nile Delta. It's a large and relatively flat plateau of limestone bedrock, which in pre-dynastic, early dynastic and Old Kingdom times would have been adjacent to a now defunct branch of the River Nile. I actually think it would be more of a shock if nobody was occupying this land before the pyramids. But the fact is, evidence suggests that people were at Giza, and for a long time, and this isn't a pseudo-archaeological opinion. In this video, I'll briefly review the evidence for pre-4th dynasty activity at Giza, and then, towards the end of this video, I'll show you something that most people have never seen before, and it pretty much proves that Giza had a long history before King Khufu ever set foot on the Giza Plateau. The history of Giza starts in the pre-dynastic, and that's because a number of pieces of pre-dynastic Madi culture pottery have been found across the plateau. We have the specimens documented and we have photographs and sketches, albeit the information is not easy to find, and not many people even know about Giza's pre-dynastic artefacts. For example, did you know that this pre-dynastic ovoid short neck unevenly polished vessel was discovered close to the Great Pyramid in 1898? For most people, probably not, because I only stumbled upon this image after trawling through an old German language publication from 1913 and then running the text through Google Translate. But this really is an amazing artefact. I'm sure that some people would love to see it, but it's not sitting in a prime position in a museum. God knows where it is today. But it should be on display, along with these pre-dynastic vessels, all found at Giza, as well as these pottery shards. There was a pre-dynastic Madi settlement not far from the Giza Plateau, and, due to these finds, it's a fair assumption the Madi culture also had a level of occupation on the Giza Plateau. And there's more, because as well as pre-dynastic, we also find early dynastic archaeology at Giza, including a number of tombs, and these are located to the south of the main 4th dynasty pyramid field. And did you know about the Wadi Cemetery? It's very close to the Great Pyramid, just north of the pyramid's adjacent Western Cemetery. It was excavated in 1904 by George Reisner and was found to be beneath an ancient dump, a dump that dates to early in the reign of King Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid. Sand, sediment and settlement debris had been cleared from the Giza Plateau to make way for Khufu's Western Cemetery to be constructed, and it was all dumped right here, on a pre-existing cemetery. 77 ancient tombs were found, 243 photographs were taken, but in the grand scheme of things, very little excavation work was done in 1904, and I don't think anything else has taken place since. The material dumped on the graves includes mud brick, plaster and limestone chips, implying there were structures on the area we now call the Western Cemetery. These structures existed before work on Khufu's funerary complex even began. And how old were the structures and the graves? Well, because of minimal excavations and documentation, we don't really have a great deal to go on. We do know there were early Old Kingdom core spear jars, a lintel with what looked like 3rd Dynasty hieroglyphs, and a cubic seat that resembles those used by King Josa at the beginning of the 3rd Dynasty. Conservatively, Reisner believed the Wadi Cemetery to be late 3rd to early 4th Dynasty, aka during the reign of King Snefru, but there is a good argument it could be a lot older. Before Khufu used the plateau for his pyramid project, Reisner believed that Giza was already a Memphite necropolis, but of secondary status to Saqqara, Meidum and Ashur, only rising to prominence when Khufu selected the site for his pyramid project. Whatever its age, the Wadi Cemetery is yet more evidence for pre-Khufu activity at Giza, to add to the early dynastic tombs located to the south and the Mahdi culture pre-dynastic pottery we've just seen. And what else is there? Well, we have the controversial dating of the Sphinx enclosure, and as I showed in my last video, there is what I believe to be hard geological evidence that the Sphinx enclosure and also the associated Sphinx temple predate the 4th dynasty. This bedrock cutting was done to extend the Sphinx temple, is part of a second phase of work, and it was dated by Egyptologists to the 4th dynasty. But as we can see, compared to the bedrock all around it, this quarried face does look quite fresh. It's far less eroded than the original enclosure wall is cut into, implying the enclosure was cut sometime, maybe a long time before the 4th dynasty. And this doesn't necessarily mean the Sphinx itself as a monument was pre-4th dynasty. For all we know, it could have been a lump of bedrock in the middle of a working quarry, what they call a quarry block, but it does mean that this enclosure or quarry, whatever its original purpose as well as the associated temple, were created before Khufu set foot on the plateau. And there's more, and this now is the main focus of the video. I'll hopefully show you something you've never seen before. We have another site at Giza, known today as the Kromer dump. An archaeological site that has become controversial in the 21st century after new excavations and conclusions by the Ancient Egypt Research Associates, also known as the AERA. And I'm not being sensationalist when I say the Kromer dump's true and full history has been rewritten in recent years, and at the expense of key finds made by the man that first led the excavations in the 1970s. Kromer. Yes, he did find Khufu and Khafre archaeology within the dump, nobody denies that, but he also found early dynastic and maybe pre-dynastic finds as well. These finds, as well as their subsequent drawings and analysis, have long been forgotten or overlooked, conveniently buried in dusty old books never to be seen again. Pictures of these archaic artefacts are few and far between, but many of the artefacts were drawn but they were only published in one book. A book that is almost impossible to find, well, unless you're an internet sleuth like me. Yes, this past weekend I spent hours and hours searching, and thankfully I found the book. And in this video, I'm about to bring to light something that's been conveniently or purposefully forgotten for many years. I'll show sketches of more than 50 artefacts from the Kromer dump, artefacts that have been looked at by a well-respected expert and has dated them to a period before the pyramids, between the pre-dynastic Nikeda II period and the 3rd dynasty of Egypt. All of these artefacts, and there are 104 in total, come from Giza, inside an ancient dump that was likely used during the reigns of Khafre and Menkaure, and indicate there was some kind of settlement at Giza long before the 4th dynasty. The history of Giza does not begin with the pyramids, and we do need to stop thinking this, because if you look hard enough, you will find there are glimpses of a far more colourful past. But this colourful past is now controversial, and, as I said, it's because the history of the Kromer dump has been rewritten after the AERA excavations of the 21st century. And, in their analysis, they left out the more ancient finds discovered by Kromer. In 2018, the AERA published a couple of articles that discussed their work on the Kromer dump, but their overall concluding remarks, their site description can be found on their website, which I've linked below in the description. To cut a long story short, after their new small-scale excavations and analysis of their finds, they say the Kromer dump is a 4th dynasty trash heap, full of settlement waste and demolition debris, lacking contextual and stratigraphic information. They say that during the 4th dynasty, workers lugged baskets of trash to a site in the desert just south of the main pyramid and mastaba field, around 550 metres due south of the Sphinx. Due to the dump having 2 different tip lines, the experts believe there was debris from 2 different locations. Some baskets of debris were poured from east to west, forming what has been named the East Dump, and some baskets were poured west to east, forming the so-called West Dump. Regarding the East Dump, the website of the AERA says the material comes from the lost city of the pyramids, which is a fancy title for the pyramid workers' village, and that's because it's the only large site to the east of the dump. They believe that much of the trash was construction debris from demolishing an older city to make way for Khafre's pyramid city. They believe it's very likely that this older settlement was Khufu's pyramid city, where the workers lived when building the Great Pyramid. They mention that the East Dump contains numerous clay ceilings, and they bear the names of both Khufu and Khafre. Now regarding the West Dump, they believe the debris came from another site, located near the area where the Menkaure Valley Temple was later built. The loads of trash came from a palace-like structure, and it dated to the time of Khufu. Carl Kromer believed it was the site of a royal roadhouse or rest house, and here the king would reside when checking on the progress of his pyramid complex. And that's all the website of the AERA really says. They place the origins of the dump and the origins of all the material inside it well within the 4th dynasty, starting with the reign of Khufu. And although it is hard to disagree with much of what is written, the fact is it isn't the full story, and I'm sure they know it. In the spring 2018 edition of Aerogram, an AERA publication, it says, quote, "For decades, scholars have thought the material excavated by Kromer dated to quite a long stretch of time, perhaps even hundreds of years. But based on our work at Hayt el Garab, which is the city of the pyramid builders located to the east of the dump, we suspect this not to be the case. We hope to prove conclusively that the Kromer material actually dates to a much smaller window of time, perhaps just a few decades covering the reigns of Khufu and Khafre." End quote. So, before the new AERA excavations even began, they were fully aware of the claims the Kromer dump contained finds dating back much earlier, covering a much longer period of time than just the reigns of Khufu and Khafre. And, as the quote says, they really didn't believe these claims, and they were going out to prove it. they must have believed that Kromer was wrong on the dating of some of his finds, that there were no pre-4th Dynasty artefacts inside the dump. And so, I would assume that before making any conclusive statements on the origins of the dump, and also the material inside it, the first thing they would have done is reanalyse and reassess the artefacts uncovered by Kromer. That would be logical and thorough, and it would be good science, especially because the excavations by the AERA were not extensive. They didn't look at the entirety of the dump. But it appears as though this never took place. The early dynastic finds discovered by Kromer were conveniently ignored, and there's no explanation as to why. And what did Kromer actually find? Well, you won't find out on the AERA website. You have to look back to the original 1970s publications by Kromer, which I'm lucky enough to own, and also the writings of clay sealing expert Mera Torcia-Regillo. Torcia-Regillo has a number of publications on clay ceilings that are found at Giza, and also Hierakonpolis, the former religious and political capital in Upper Egypt at the beginning of dynastic history. Inside the Kromer dump, as well as finds from the reigns of Khufu and Khafre, two of the three Giza pyramid builders, Karl Kromer firmly believed the dump contained material from earlier times, saying, quote, "There was an extensive settlement on the site of today's pyramid district of Giza. The life of the settlement probably extended from the 1st dynasty to the 3rd dynasty. At the beginning of the 4th dynasty, the rock plateau on which the settlement was located was declared a burial precinct, and the settlement was demolished." End quote. In 1982, German archaeologist Karl Butzer wrote an article in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies reviewing Kromer's work, and he never questioned that the finds inside the dump did cover the 1st to 4th dynasties. On the website of the University of Vienna, they have a page dedicated to what they call the Kromer collection, objects that were found inside the dump, and they say the material ranges from the 1st to 4th dynasties. And then we get to the extensive body of work by Mera Torcia-Regillo, an expert on mud seal impressions. She says that 238 pieces were found inside the dump. Some of them were assigned to Khufu, some Khafre, some to an unknown king, and some of them only contained incised signs. But 104 of these mud ceilings, which is nearly half, contain figurative impressions, and they were used to seal a variety of things, such as vases, sacks, wooden boxes, bundles, doors, boxes, chests, papyrus rolls, and so on. From the ceilings alone, she says they testify to the long, if not continuous life of the Giza settlement, going back to the Proto-Dynastic period, through to the Thinite dynasties and the Joseon Age, all the way to the 4th dynasty. She says, quote, "Since the site was present in the Proto-Dynastic period, we deduced that it was not built to follow the first Great Pyramid construction." End quote. Until this past weekend, I had only seen a handful of pictures of these early dynastic mud ceilings, and I noted how in her various works on the subject, Torcia-Regillo often referred back to a 1981 publication by Peter Caploni. In this publication, there are apparently drawings of 56 of the 104 early dynastic seals, but this really is an extremely hard book to locate. I wrote a number of emails to book collectors, Egyptologists, and even the publisher of the 1981 book, but those that replied could not help me, and everyone else just ignored. And just when I was about to give up on Sunday evening, after trawling the internet for many hours, I finally found the book, and now I have the pictures. The only pictures in existence of 56 of the 104 early dynastic seal impressions that were found at Giza. Finds that were clearly neglected by the AERA and finds that do prove there was a settlement at Giza for hundreds of years before the pyramids. And here they are. They're fascinating, because as well as pushing back the history of Giza to the beginning of dynastic history, according to Torcio Regillo, they suggest connections with the Near East, and that's because some of the iconography is also seen in Mesopotamia at the same time. We see figurative imagery with animalistic and vegetal motifs, often combined with some isolated signs of writing or proto-hieroglyphs, which seem to have only decorative purposes. The same has also been said for seal impressions discovered at Hierakonpolis. They're very similar to the ones found at Giza. For example, the lizard glyph is found at both Giza and Hierakonpolis. At Giza there are many zoomorphic motifs, but arranged in a number of different ways, such as animals in a human pose. One example are these two monkeys, and they're portrayed in a very similar way to what we find at the First Dynasty tomb of Hemeka at Saqqara, and the monkey is alongside the Serek of King Den. Late pre-dynastic and early dynastic seals from Abydos are also comparable to those found at Giza, and the similarities likely indicate trade relations between Lower and Upper Egypt, which existed among the three towns of Giza, Hierakonpolis and Abydos, all of which were linked via the River Nile. There is so much detail I could go into, and it's all thanks to the in-depth work of Torcio Regillo. Being a mud seal expert, I see absolutely no reason to question her informed opinion on the relics from Giza, that before the pyramids there was a settlement that existed from the beginning of dynastic history all the way through to the 4th dynasty. And of course the pre-dynastic Madi pottery found at Giza does show there was pre-dynastic activity as well, the scale of which we can only speculate. It's worth adding that Carl Kromer also found shards of pottery inside the dump, and they look to have possible pre-dynastic decoration. The page on the AERA website does frustrate me because it paints an inaccurate picture of the Kromer dump. Yes, to some extent the information is correct, but it fails to mention 104 key discoveries, and there was clearly no attempt to reanalyse or even acknowledge the early dynastic seals discovered by Kromer. A chapter of history, chapter 1, is missing. But now I have the pictures of these missing artefacts, I want them to be seen and acknowledged by everyone with an interest in the origins of Giza, because in my opinion it is important. It's hard data, hard evidence. It's a selection of documented archaeological finds that predate the pyramids, and it seems like some people are trying to wipe them from history, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge them in any official capacity. So, to conclude this video, I personally now have absolutely no doubt that there were people living at Giza before the pyramids were built in the 4th dynasty. And the evidence? Well, to recap, 1. There is unquestionable pre-dynastic pottery found at a number of locations at Giza. 2. There are early dynastic tombs to the south of the main pyramid field. 3. The Wadi Cemetery was buried beneath settlement debris at the beginning of Khufu's reign, indicating the tombs and this settlement predate King Khufu. 4. 104 pre-4th dynasty mud seal impressions were found in the Kromer dump, a dump containing material from the Giza Plateau. And 5. We have clear geological evidence the Sphinx enclosure and phase 1 of the Sphinx temple both predate the 4th dynasty. People were here at Giza for hundreds and hundreds of years before it became a grand funerary complex fit for a king, and I'm sure that this video only scratches the surface. And so, I'll keep researching and keep digging as I try to paint an accurate picture of the origins of the Giza Plateau. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.